Conquest of Elysium 5 is a high fantasy auto-battler with a lot of mechanics and random elements turned up to 11, making the game feel very sandboxy despite having the difficulty of a roguelike. For example, if something regenerates, it can regenerate back from the dead. If something can cast high-tier magic, it's probably going to wipe entire armies. If something looks scary, that's because it is. This game is surprisingly deep with a lot going on, and at a certain point it can be broken, which is what this video is meant to help with, serving as both an introduction and an advanced guide to lesser known mechanics and strategies. At a glance, the core mechanics of this game are very simple, especially compared to Dominions, which I choose to believe takes place in the same universe as this game to explain the reused assets. But what sets Conquest of Elysium apart from Dominions or really any other game is Elysium itself. Elysium is a slightly eerie but resource-rich continent that has many supernatural forces surrounding it, and the game is designed with a strong focus towards exploration and expansion rather than development. But the catch is the world is also fighting back, as there are other forces at play that will constantly test the strength of your armies, and this makes it difficult to hold territory without enough armies to constantly protect your power. Brigands will sneak around and ambush you, pirates will raid your ports, horrors and undead will haunt small portions of the map, and sometimes the best course of action is to just pack up and run away. This makes the game slightly less about trying to kill the other player factions and instead focus on fighting for whatever directly benefits you, so that you are always better able to defend yourself and project your own power. Your armies are your main source of income, and they need to be strong enough so that they don't die. But movement is limited, so you need to split up and spread your forces as thin as you can to capture territory, ideally countering everything that you go up against. Most of your armies will come from citadels, which are where you leverage most of your economy. This is a very basic foundation of the game, where gold producing tiles give you purchasing power and your power is projected in armies made by your citadels, which you expand from. There's also a few unwritten rules that will help you decide where to explore, what to deal with, and what to ignore. The various things that roam Elysium usually play by their own rules in terms of how they are created or what their intentions are. This game has several factions, and each has their own unique playstyles, from trolls hiding in the forest and planting giant mushrooms that speed hallucinogenic drugs, to basement dwellers draining the life force from the land with the power of iPhone and 4chan, to the church state where the meta is to edge your god by only breaking some of the 7 seals that are preventing them from unleashing the rapture. Each faction generally has a cohesive kit that works with what they want to do. Some want to take over the forest, some want to take over the mines, and generally everyone wants to take over human settlements, but some have special interests in their inhabitants. Generally, the population centers of Elysium will be protected by a unified force of soldiers and peasants who will try to defend and retake their lost land. They represent the civilization of people who are trying to colonize and maintain order in Elysium, and the world settings dictate what age this civilization is going through and what state the map is in. Also, every unit description in the game is from the perspective of their scholars, who managed to get me to read about how much the humble Elysium bear likes potato. They also have a bias for the Baron, who I believe is the best starting faction for someone who is diving into the game, for 3 main reasons. 1. It mainly uses basic human troops, which helps you gauge the power level when expanding as other factions. 2. You don't care about brigands ambushing you because your knights will just kill them. 3. You only rely on gathering forces at and expanding from citadels, which is the most basic way the game is played. As the Baron, you get a yearly draft based on how many low-tier settlements and other special locations you have under your control. The Baron does have a few tools up his sleeve, but what makes his faction work is the knights that you get from the yearly draft. In Elysium, you might think knights may sound a little too mundane to be a faction's trump card, and to an extent you're right. But Baron's knights are heavily armored and have a shield, which means they can easily attack settlements defended by archers. And they hit like a truck on their first attack, which means they can take small fights on the map with very little attrition. The end result is you have a powerful armored blitzkrieg and can quickly take over the map like the Germans in World War II, and use your jumpstart economy to take everyone else out. What the fuck? I don't have enough commanders for this. Necromancer is probably the faction that has received the most love from the developers, along with the most disdain from the community if you ever pick it in a multiplayer game, due to its large arsenal and answer to everything. Whereas the Baron teaches the player to split up and even specialize their forces into small armies to clear the map efficiently, the Necromancer teaches the concept of chaff. Magic, while sometimes questionable, is incredibly powerful in this game, especially necromancy. Every faction can get generic mages by capturing magic libraries, but mages tend to be very fragile and prone to getting violated, usually by running out of chaff or getting ambushed, which is why a scout is mandatory. One way you can make your casters hard to kill is by acquiring magical items. During a recent playthrough, I managed to gear up the Pope with magical equipment and then sent him on his way to solo entire armies. But that is unreliable, as magic items are rarely offered, and the ones that actually make you hard to kill are even rarer. The long-term aspirations of a necromancer is finding a solution to the false sense of security that is their own hit points. Usually when a living being dies, it leaves behind a corpse, along with their soul going to Hades. The corpse can be resurrected as either an armed skeleton or a barely clumsy but tanky zombie. As a necromancer, your goal is to throw your deceased loved ones at the enemy so that they are distracted long enough for you to blast them. In terms of combat magic, the best spells summon Temporary Long Dead, because it blasts the ears of whoever watches the fight with Mongolian throat singing. And if you bring direwolves, it becomes furry Mongolian throat singing. Resurrecting permanent undead on the map makes your casters insane, which is basically a stacking chance to be unable to lead your troops across the map or do your special rituals. Because of this, it's generally advised to only resurrect the dead with your apprentices and invest your resources into your main necromancer. This also means that your apprentices are technically limited use consumables. Their lives reduced to the task of resurrecting undead until they go insane. If you really want to get more use out of your apprentices, the cheapest way is to cast Twice-Born on them. If they die, they'll come back as undead with sanity regeneration scaling with what level they are, making them useful in the long term as agents who will go across the map and raise undead for you to pick up with your other commanders. Regardless, you should still be able to get a large enough horde going to take a decent chunk of Elysium with your first apprentice, as long as you are making the most of your undead, by upgrading them and backing them up with your archers and casters. This way you will efficiently deal with enemy armies and minimize the damage your chaff needs to block for you. After you get the hang of doing this, you can afford to start messing around with Hades or research better rituals. Hades is a direct mirror of the map of Elysium, where everything is dead, undead, or dying. Most living things that die go to Hades as dispossessed spirits, making it very hard to control Hades as you have to fight off the endless storms of everyone that has died. But if you manage to take control of a recruitment location in Hades, you can hire ghosts to help keep a foothold. The powerful undead that guard parts of Hades can also be summoned as a necromancer. The catch is it's a pretty expensive gamble with what you get. Do you want to save up to eventually turn into a mortal lich that can solo entire armies while raising its own? Or do you want to gamble your decapitated hands away in hopes of getting a Tartarian spirit? A being of concentrated spookiness, capable of delivering Halloween to all of Elysium by itself. But if rolling the dice with summons is what you are into, then look no further than the Demonologist, who, like any other elderly man, is perfectly content with gambling. Not only do you gamble with what you summon, you also gamble with if your summon decides to beat the living shit out of you. Imps are the easiest to summon and control en masse, making them chaff. But more importantly, chaff that can either fly, or has a ranged attack, so they can help with sieging fortified locations early on, like ports and cities. Also, if you summon imps in a snowy area, there is a 50% chance you'll summon ice imps, which are amazing compared to most of the other types of imps. You should want to do your summoning during the winter anyway, since your movement across the map is slow during this period. Demons, just like imps, are pretty easy to summon and are a mixed bag with a few really good results. Generally, they are efficient frontline tanks that will reduce the attrition your armies take, but they need support and time between fights to heal. Greater demon summoning, as the name implies, is much better than demon and imp summoning, and getting to a point where you can safely use this ritual is a big power spike for you. Spam it, as it will give you answers to almost everything. Infernal Horde is when your summons start becoming very high stakes, but some of what you can get from this ritual can easily put down failed attempts at the next ritual. Demon Lieutenants are your most reliable endgame, letting you make specialized armies and giving you access to magic items. And Demon Lords are the physical manifestation of the worst you can say is no. They are extremely expensive to have a decent chance at controlling. Overall, my favorite summon from the roster is the Demon Knight because it's an easy to use upgraded version of the Baron's Knights, and Kingdom can't get over it. But if I were to rank Demonologists based on their summons alone, it would actually be at the bottom of the list compared to all the other sacrifice classes because their demons are simply too overpriced. But one missing key to the puzzle is not a ritual, but a combat spell that your casters have access to, called Hellbind Heart. Anyone that can cast Tier 2 Infernal Magic can have the spell, and it lets you enslave enemies in combat, permanently putting them onto your team. Late game Demonologist isn't actually successfully summoning and binding Demon Lords. It's building a party that can enslave your failed summons, letting you pump out Demon Lieutenants for free, and then getting yelled at for tryharding in multiplayer. It's not dirty.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
You're bullying noobs.
No, I'm playing Demonologist, and I'm basically 1v3 at the moment. This is why Witch is often picked as a teammate for Demonologist in multiplayer, because she can more easily take control of his failed summons. And Witch tends to need the Demon Commanders a lot more anyway, since they are a forced faction that relies heavily on map control. Forced factions in general tend to have a very asymmetrical way to play the game. They are all expected to take over huge regions of the map that are really just hazardous for most other factions, and in return they get loads of utility to just have a presence everywhere. Kingdom sees most animals and by extension most forced factions as an existential threat. All while the Dryads are seen as lost women that forgotten where they belong. Whereas the King wants to eliminate all illegal herbs and shrooms that, when cooked, enable the user to gain temporary omniscience. These products also enable trolls to change their gender, so they don't have to compete with the Troll King. Meanwhile, Troll King himself has his own complications with competition. Troll King belongs in multiplayer, on a team. This faction provides an absurd amount of vision, utility, and ability to clear resource nodes, but struggles to actually put together strong armies. This is where teammates come in. While Troll King can do one big fight a turn, their teammates can spam little armies to do little easy fights to clear the map very quickly. But this is just an early game strategy that sets you up for the mid game. And in single player, you don't have teammates to help clear the map quickly, which is where you start looking into making very specialized armies as Troll King. Goblins at first look extremely terrible. Just like toddlers, they don't hit very hard, and their soft bodies aren't very impressive when it comes to limit testing blunt force trauma. But this is where animals come in. Most animals have high health, no armor, low initiative, and are entirely melee, which means in order to handle them you need to pass a DPS check, which goblins can actually do. Having a little cheap goblin army cleaning up weaker animals means your Troll King has to do with a lot less on the map. Later on, during the fall of Year 2, your disappointed mother will see how badly you are still doing at conquering Elysium, and will promptly take over as your most valuable asset. Realm gives you access to rituals, magic, and the ability to clear locations that Troll King probably couldn't. And this is where the Troll King faction starts to really take off in multiplayer. So here's a clip from a multiplayer game I had a while back. Troll Mom already passed through the area and trolled all the forests, and she's really fast at doing it. And this gave me a ton of vision and locked down this huge choke point right here in the middle of the map. And this ended up paying off for me because the little troll army I managed to scramble together ended up actually being able to abuse the vision and see that the Voice of El's Templars were stuck in a settlement, which meant they wouldn't be able to abuse their numbers advantage. Nice little siege bait that pretty much killed around 600 gold from the enemy. And finally, your late game will be trying to wake up your sleeping grandpa without getting an ass whooping. Then sneaking giant reptiles around enemy territory to catch smaller armies and claim resources. I've won multiple 1v2s by doing this, although when you do have a teammate that can actually build a strong doom stack, you won't even need to resort to guerrilla warfare in the late game. Which is exactly what happened here. The Voice of El that I spoon-fed and the Rax Raja completely annihilated each other. And knowing that the Voice of El was going to continue to scale while I was going to go in and steal resources uncontested, resulted in the enemy team surrendering. Although we still got to at least see a really funny fight.
Wake up! Stop shooting each other, wake up! You're failing your god! Hold on, how much health does he have? No!
And in another game, I spawned too far away from my Scourge Lord teammate, who fell behind because they couldn't clear any of the mines for themselves. But it ended up being fine because I was able to ward off the enemy Bakemono player and kill his teammate. Factions that tend to rely on mines, usually gem collectors, are probably the most misunderstood, and are regarded as extremely weak early game. This is because most mines, except for the ones defended by Kingdom, are usually pretty difficult to clear. Trolls, Bakemono, Dwarves, and Pale Ones can all shrug off most archer fire due to their heavy armor, so you need to build a strong clearing army to deal with them most of the time, usually with the help of magic, or just avoiding the fight entirely when the reward isn't worth the losses. But that's okay because most factions can't clear all the tiles they need at the start of the game anyway. So lastly, I will cover Warlock and its closest derivatives, the Cloudlord and Pale Ones, and how they all escape the early game in their own unique ways. Warlock is the most prominent gem collector, pretty much having most of its power budget in summoning rituals, especially when combining multiple gem types. But usually people just rate them for their early game being weak, and I just don't see it. They start with 2 casters, and the only thing that they're afraid of is either running out of human trap or being ambushed. So get easy gold income and clear what you can with your casters until you can snowball with elementals. Because elementals don't heal in Elysium, air elementals are generally seen as the best because they have a good ranged attack and likely won't get hit, basically adding free DPS to the back of your armies that you can use to clear. Fire and water elementals are good frontline tanks for clearing mines, just keep them away from archers because they have no armor. Earth elementals are okay, they aren't traditional frontline units because they pop up in the enemy's ranks and will die because of it, so I don't really use them for clearing the map, and instead only use them in emergency confrontations in hopes of killing enemy mages. Later on, just spam Para elementals, many of them are unique to Warlock for a reason. Especially Mist Warriors because once again, cold damage ignores armor. Cloudlord also has Mist Warriors for the mid game, but otherwise they exchange much of Warlock summoning rituals for flying troops. Flying troops often end up being a no trap, as they rush into melee too quickly and die to your own caster's spells. So in order to escape the early game, I usually specialize my armies between ranged and melee. Melee armies focus primarily on settlements for easy gold and trade. Ranged armies primarily use raw damage and disposable summons in hopes of clearing strong enemies that melee armies would struggle with. Pale Ones are somewhat opposite of Cloudlord. They get tankiness instead of mobility, and instead of worshipping avians, they love their mummified peers. Some would even suggest that their society celebrates white power. Another celebrated figure is the King of the Deep, but just like a pet hamster, it's usually a temporary asset. Pale One troops, mainly Cavern Garden Ancients, are ideal at taking mines but struggle at clearing fortified locations. And the main way to deal with fortified locations as Pale Ones is to summon their cousin, the Olms, who can mentally reject images of their mother in order to inflict brain death on their opponents. Fire elementals also make a reappearance in this faction's roster. Because it's hard to put good damage dealers behind them, you have to be way more careful about the matchups rather than just simply taking for a ranged damage dealer or spellcaster. I return to this game a lot and I still have fun playing it, especially recently with the new simultaneous turns mod, which made games much more quick and accessible and breathed life into the multiplayer community. Unfortunately, that was short-lived as some drama unfolded when a wolf accidentally insulted a booger, who then cried to a demon and a dragon, who then forced the wolf and everyone they associate with to go to a different Discord server to continue playing, taking most of the active multiplayer community with them, which makes the game harder for newer players to find people to play with. Regardless if you want to or can even find people to play with, I hope you all learned a lot from this video.